Welcome back to the Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is Kate, and I have a question for you. What did you want to be when you grew up? For me, it was all about drawing. Comic strip creator, artist, fashion designer. What am I doing now? Leadership and organizational development consulting. I can connect the dots from then to now, but I know from the outside it probably looks like I didn't so much follow a career path as jump on a career roller coaster. I know I'm not alone. Most of us don't grow up and do the jobs we imagined at 5 or 15 or even 25. Which is why talking about career management is so important. In fact, it may be best to talk about owning our careers rather than managing them. I've had the pleasure of knowing today's guest at multiple stages of his career, from his time as an administrative fellow to his earliest executive roles, and lots in between. Welcome to the Comfy Chairs, Frank. Please introduce yourself for us.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for the opportunity just to chat today, and it's great to catch up with a long-term friend who we've worked together for a long time.
Agreed.
My name is Frank Sawyer. I am a hospital executive for a large national hospital organization. I've been in this field for frighteningly almost 20 years now and have gotten to work on the hospital side, the system strategy side, the physician practice side, and it feels like everything in between. So we're very much looking forward to unpacking all sorts of leadership topics and my journey from there to here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Frank. Again, it is a treat to have you on. You're one of my guests that I've seen you, not to sound like I'm an old lady, but I've seen you grow up. And it's been more than 15 years now, I think, since we first started working together, which maybe I am an old lady.
Yeah, that is wild. And when you approached with the opportunity to talk, it was exciting because you're one of those people where you saw me at the beginning when I was a plucky, overconfident 20 something in leadership and learning through the school of hard knocks. And then we're there as I begin to succeed and progress and learn. And you were always there, along with a few others, to provide grace and lessons and feedback, all of which were instrumental in helping me grow and develop. So, very appreciative. And then we get to go back and talk about some of it retrospectively. So this will be fun.
Right. Yeah. I have a very clear memory when you were first dating your now wife of you being in my office talking about just being in a relationship and kind of trying to navigate that as a 20-something year old.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. It's always a good time to be able to reflect on those long-term friendships and work relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I kicked off asking the age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Let's go ahead and start at your beginning, sir. What did you want to be when you were little?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was definitely an iterative process. When people look at me now, I think they would be surprised, but there is a common thread. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a farmer. My grandfather, whom I'm actually named after, was a farmer, and we would spend time on their farm in Southwest Kentucky. And I thought he had the coolest job in the world. So I wanted to be a farmer. And then I joke, but not joking, I have really bad allergies. And so being in the fields all the time literally would just have me swollen up, something crazy. And so probably not the right play for me. Got a little bit older and I really wanted to be an architect. And I was one of those kids that was just captivated by city skylines. And I was obsessed with Chicago and New York and San Francisco. And not to date myself, but remember, like, for all the 80s babies, that computer game SimCity? I would build cityscapes and wanted to do that. And so you get to a place in high school where you start playing around with AutoCAD, and I was awful at that. So I'm like, okay, can't be a farmer, probably shouldn't be an architect. What do I want to do next? Well, I've always been a sports junkie, and I wanted to get into the sports profession and be a general manager of a professional sports franchise. Had a great contact and mentor in that space who had the wisdom to sit me down and say, Frank, you're a smart guy, but how many professional teams are there in North America, in the United States? About 120. How many people do you think want those jobs? Tens of thousands. I will help you, but your odds aren't really good. If you like large scale running of businesses, have you ever thought of hospitals?
Okay.
Because they come in big, small, different types of cities, but they are everywhere. How about you pursue that? And that was really the pivot to where I am now. But what I learned retrospectively, looking back at farmer, architect, running a sports team, and even in healthcare in 2024, the part of me that drives all of that is I like to create, I like to build, I like to think of ways to make things better. And so that was my through line from the early days to the current days.
Yeah, I can see that too. I also see a theme from the Farmer Frank days. I'm sorry, I'll never call you that again.
It's all right.
To now, and in the time that I've known you, of long-term stewardship, starting something, planting something, designing something, and seeing it through to its end, and the continual cycle that happens in
Absolutely.
those fields as well. That's really cool
Absolutely.
to see.
Yeah. So that's it's fun. And now it's how do I apply that in the current day to what I'm up to.
Yeah. So you've kind of answered some of the traditional questions, like when did you first learn about healthcare administration? What attracted you to it? I'm curious, what keeps you coming back? People that listen know that I worked in healthcare for a number of years. It's evident. I've said this before. I will probably say it again. The last few years of healthcare, it's really kind of sucked the joy out of it. I think it's important to ask my healthcare colleagues, how are you doing? Why do you keep coming back?
Right. The why I keep doing it is actually the exact same answer to what attracted me to it in the beginning. And, so I happened upon this internship via the aforementioned mentor. And I still remember my first day in the hospital setting. And I was fortunate where it wasn't a business internship, it was actually on clinical nursing units. And to see the energy, the activity, the diversity of people, intellects, and professions all in a single space, working on arguably the most important thing possible, i.e., the health and well being of other human beings, I was completely captivated and thought, wait, if this is what work is, this actually looks really interesting and fun, and I can make an impact. To this day, it's still that I enjoy. I enjoy the different people and professions and how dynamic it is. It's always changing. Truly, no 2 days are alike, and it's never boring.
Yeah.
But the caveat is even more so now today, there's a need for change and growth and innovation and development. There's a need to build a better future in healthcare for the people who work in this space, who have dedicated their lives to it, for patients, for communities, for financial impacts of our economy. And so the opportunity to be a part of a long-standing problem and build a better future in this moment is what really keeps me inspired. We're really at the precipice of significant technological transformation in care delivery as well. And I think how patients receive care and how healthcare professionals deliver care will look vastly different 10 years from now than it does today. And I get to be a part of that. But that's what keeps me coming back after pandemics and financial crises and recessions and staffing shortages and all of the things that make this field so complicated.
Well, you're talking about something that I think the entire world not just healthcare, but all industries, maybe bar a few, are dealing with right now, that we are at this inflection point technologically where we're about to tip over, where more people are native technology users than not.
Mm-hmm.
It occurred to me just now that I think it would probably be good for us to talk about what's the difference between a job and a career.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think one is better than the other, but they are kind of distinct things.
Yeah.
I have opinions.
Yeah,
What's yours?
sure. So to me, it's really time is what governs it, and strategic versus transactional governs it. A job to me can be long term, but it's more short term focused, transactional. What am I doing for compensation? And if it fulfills me, if it is a passion, that's a benefit, but is not necessarily a requirement to be successful. A career is about the long game, and how do I stage growth and development towards some objectives that, yes, include, financial, but it's more of a strategic plan for how I do my work and what jobs I have within it. And again, both are um, there's many ways to approach your professional livelihood, and sometimes within your career you just have jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes jobs turn into careers, but how you fundamentally approach them is different in terms of the time horizon and the strategies that go within them.
I think I would create kind of an analogy to talk about it where, like, a job is a plant and a career is the garden. That
Hmm.
a job is a career element, and you can have a job separate from a career, but the larger picture is this thing that has been planned and tended to and
Right.
ends up producing possibly more than the single plant. I believe that holding a job for the purpose of a paycheck so that you can function in the world is just as important for individual health and well-being as having a long-term planned out, quote unquote, successful career. All work has the potential to be sacred. All work is noble. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of your career, though. And when you decide
Hmm.
to make that distinction between, I'm going to focus on doing this single job well, and you turn your attention to what part of my story does this job play, then we can begin to talk about careers and the long-term management of them.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree completely, and I think it's important that people realize that all work is sacred and
Mm-hmm.
serves a purpose, even when you don't understand exactly what purpose it is serving. So,
Yeah.
and that really just gets back into reverence and valuing people
Yep.
and all of us and all of the work that we put in, regardless of what the plan is behind it.
Mm-hmm. We are on the same page, sir. Um, where I'd like to go next is talking a little bit about the difference between this distinction that I've made of career management
Hmm.
and career ownership.
Yeah.
In this context, how do you think these are different?
Yeah, I love this question. And for me, your career, when you take ownership of it, is very similar to if you owned a business. When you own your career, you are responsible for your brand. You're responsible for your PR. You're responsible for the vision of where you want to go. You're responsible for cleaning up your messes that you may create along the way. You're responsible for understanding and creating your strategy, and you're responsible for understanding how you fit into the broader employment market. It all comes back to you. Managing your career is a more passive react and respond type of approach to it. And for those people that are particularly ambitious, sometimes they get caught in a cycle of managing when they need to own it. But also the inverse takes place where sometimes when you own it, it doesn't go the way you want. And that doesn't mean you get to stomp your feet and say, this has to be how it is. Sometimes in the journey, there are periods where you need to manage your situation and then, progress later. So what would I mean by that? Sometimes you're in a position where you can't move.
Yeah.
You can't take the job. You can't leave the company. You can't take the shift on nights that you would like to. You can't take the pay cut because you have responsibilities. And that doesn't mean you're not owning it, but you've got to manage within the confines or constraints of your life. There are other times where you have the absolute freedom to grab it by the reins and roll the dice. So again, it's across a larger journey. You move in and out of it, of ownership and management, depending on what's going on. But I would definitely say ownership is a much more, proactive, all-in approach to, taking control over your situation.
It's a little bit like the distinction between job and career, if you think about it, because, a career involves jobs. Ownership involves management. You can't not manage the circumstances, your responses, your choices when you own your career. If you decide that I'm going to, and I like this, the fact that you talked about vision, that it's not just the vision for the organization or the team, it's also what's my vision for how my work, and I'll repeat myself, the story of my work, the course that it takes. I think I have to manage that as I go. So they're not separate from each other. Ownership is just that more holistic kind of, you've really put, you've bet on yourself, essentially. Where career management can be a little more passive, that you're not necessarily looking for or making plans to get to a point. I'm a big advocate for focusing on the type of work that draws somebody rather than particular titles. And you've kind of raised that point that some people that have they have a big helping of career ambition, and we can talk about ambition as well, because I think that's an important subject in this topic. But some people are looking for that next title, for the promotion, even for the pay raise, rather than, is this work that's important? Again, I advocate for what's the type of work, what type of impact, where do you feel most fulfilled, where do you feel most drained? When I coach people, those are the conversations I like to have. And then we back our way into, well, what's the job that goes with that? But I'd like to hear kind of your thoughts on that subject too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd start by saying everyone needs to stop and think, what do I like to do? What gives me energy? What makes me happy? And then they need to, I would advise you realize that that is a destination and not a place. And ask yourself, what are the steps that I have to take to get to that place? And I say that distinction because you do run across people who are like, I'm going to basically not do anything until I find the job that makes me happy. And I'm like, yes, but that often is something you have to build to or earn to, or even maybe discover along the way, because you don't know what you're going to like and dislike until you actually do it. I talk to a lot of early careerists or folks that have sought me out for mentorship, which I chuckle at myself. and I simply say, I'll share with you what I think and feel and have experienced, but I don't really consider myself anybody's mentor.
Well, that's technically what
But
mentoring is, sir. So, yes.
oh, I guess you're right. So, um, but with that, I truly believe that particularly early on, titles don't matter. Experiences matter, because no matter how talented or smart you think you are, we're all coming out on the professional spaces largely blank slates. And it's your job in the first portion of your career to simply get experience, how to deal with people, how to problem solve, how to strategize, how to deliver results for whatever department or company or organization you're working for. And every single thing you do is adding a tool to your toolbox. And what is in your toolbox later will determine your level of success and the opportunities that you have in your career. And if you don't have any tools in your toolbox, you are going to be at a severe disadvantage and probably never get there. Um, so I've always felt that anything that is new that can teach you, add a tool to your toolbox, expose you to people or situations you never have, do it, irrespective of the titles. Additionally, I see people chasing glamorous titles as opposed to significant impact. And I tell anyone that'll listen that is a misstep, because at the end of the day, one day you're going to be in an interview of a job you really want. And the person who's sitting across from you on that interview table interviewing you is going to want to know, what have you done?
Yeah.
Not what were you called? What have you delivered versus who are you around? And too often people think, if I have this title and I watched other people do X, that'll sound good, versus what we really want to hear is, what were the problems? How did you solve them? And what were the quantifiable results that you personally were responsible for putting on the scoreboard? And whether that is a glamorous department or job or the most unglamorous is almost immaterial. We want to know how you operated, thought, problem solved, used relationships to get to a success, and what were the failures, and what did you learn to make you better and prepared for this thing today.
And this is one of the places I think where managing intersects with ownership. There are very few fields that are title agnostic. So while you shouldn't, I believe, focus solely on title, as somebody owning their career path, being knowledgeable about the types of titles that exist or are appropriate and what a career ladder could look like in your field of interest is an important part of it, so that you're not going after something that's not possible, right?
Right.
And also that you're able to talk across businesses and industries about the work
Right.
that you do. I've been part of a merger, as you're aware, and the one of the things that was challenging is that the titles were not they didn't crosswalk well, if you will. They were not apples to apples. So it is important, I think, for us as we are designing, owning our own careers, our paths, that we are informed, that we educate ourselves. And that's part of how, it's one of the things I think that people can do. It's a little simple technique to move toward owning their careers. Because that's one thing I think I definitely want us to spend some time on, is what are simple approaches and techniques that we can use in this space to name our preferences and aspirations, but also be able to talk about them in the shape of, in a job-shaped fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me unpack that a little bit. Within the construct of titling, sometimes it makes sense and it's clear to everybody, and then sometimes it is unclear. I remember in the role that you and I first met, it was called a transition project manager, which was a word salad
Such a
of,
word salad.
what does that even mean? And I recall in, interviews after that, they were like, what did you do? Like, what does that even mean? And I remember distinctly saying, hey, I'm never going to take a title that is so ambiguous that is actually going to hurt me
Mm-hmm.
in the next interview.
Yeah.
But what it also taught me is I had to get really crisp at, and we all need to be really crisp at, what do you do? Because at the end of the day, that job was about project managing a merger of two facilities, and then I can fill in all the dot 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 in terms
Mm-hmm.
of what that means. And if you say, hey, I managed a merger, I was project management manager for this merger, okay, people in the business world know what that means. So we all need to perfect that elevator pitch of, what do you do,
Yeah.
and what are the outcomes or results of the work that you put in. But then, yes, absolutely advocate for titling that fits into the career path that you want to go on. Because it is very much a chain, and it's got to make sense to whomever is going to be deciding what your next step is going to be.
There's a little bit of language that I'd like us to spotlight, and I think it holds the answer to some of the questions we've been asking. The traditional question, the almost trite, cliche question, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's very different from the way we answer it once we're in the workforce. We don't talk about necessarily, this is what I am. We talk about what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we can answer the be question for ourselves, we can start building the blueprint of what we're going to own. And then managing it is the do part. The jobs,
Mm-hmm.
the tasks, the skills and experiences that make up what it is I want to be. I've been doing some thinking recently. I've written a little bit on like LinkedIn about this, that I just don't know very many people who are actually doing the jobs they wanted when they were little. I think we don't know when we're small what type of jobs are out there, by and large, and we answer based on the day's interests. You have your story of farmer to architect to sports manager. I seriously wanted to be a fashion designer when I was very small, and then realized, oh no, I want to do art. No, I want to be a writing professor. And what I can trace through all of those, just like we talked about for you, of that creating and improving and being there sort of for the long haul in that process. For myself, I can see that the common thread is creation of products and services and work that other people enjoy. That
Mm-hmm.
my thing, the career ownership that I would talk about, is I'm here to do work that allows me to create things that make life better for other people. And sometimes that's a thing like a course. Other times it's coaching. Hopefully this podcast is included in that. That's what I want to be, is somebody who makes things to help other people.
Mm-hmm.
Then, well, how do I do that? I do that through this service or that action. For you want to be somebody who creates, who does improvement, who invests in mission-driven work that makes people better, physically, mentally, emotionally. Well, how do you do that? It could be that you provide sustenance. It could be that you provide shelter or entertainment, or now that you provide the leadership that's needed for the administration of care. And I think that's the type of exercise that leaders can practice to get clear about, all right, if this is what I want to be, what do I need to do? And then start to have those conversations with their own employees.
Yeah. No, I love that because, inevitably you have employees that want to grow and they're stuck in this box of, well, what's the next title
Mm-hmm.
versus what is the thing that is going to challenge you, fulfill you, and make you, happy
Yeah.
so that you can continue to grow and move to the next thing. And oftentimes the next title is so both finite because there are only so many specific jobs that they can see with that title, or constraining that when that doesn't line up with the appropriate timing or opportunity, now you have a disengaged person because they're like, well, I don't have any doors or option and now I'm stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, no, there's a whole laundry list of opportunities for you if you had a different worldview of what opportunities meant.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I wish that we could seed in much earlier on in work life for people is the understanding that advancement does not automatically equal promotion. And that for many
Mm-hmm.
people, promotion is actually not the goal. If you don't have people who are dedicated to the day to day work, who have
Mm-hmm.
made a life, a career out of a particular expertise, then you're not going to be able to function.
No, I'm with you. And I think that a question that people have to ask themselves is what do they really want and why?
Mm-hmm.
Because you
Yeah.
can get on a career ladder and it just becomes about the next rung almost at a subconscious level versus asking yourself, like, what is it I want to do? Do I
Mm-hmm.
really want that next step? What do I want for my life and how does this fit within it? Versus this is just the next thing that I'm supposed to do without any real thought around what are the implications of that next step. And for me, I have experienced that, and it's a bit of a push pull because there is this there's part of the world that's like, this is what you're supposed to do next, and you're quote ready and you've spent x amount of time and it's what you do. And then there's a part of my world that's like, yes, but that next step based on what quote unquote you should do doesn't necessarily fit with what you want, who you are, or this phase of life,
Mm-hmm.
and equally weighing all of that,
Yeah.
simultaneously, or at least being thoughtful in, you know, the decision making process. You know, Katie is a wonderful check and balance for me
Mm-hmm.
because, she'll often push back and say, hey, this opportunity that's in front of you, is that really what you want? Here are the gains, but here are the opportunity costs. And make sure you're thinking about the whole 360, not just, it's the
Yeah.
next rung or the next promotion or the next title, etc.
Yeah. Well, that is a perfect simple technique is go to the people closest to you. Whether it's like you going to your wife or if I were to go to my husband, but a best friend, a parent, somebody that you know has your back and
Mm-hmm.
asking them, what do you think about this? And what questions do you have for me about it? Can be a great way to
Yeah.
get that balance because there's somebody that's on your side. They want the best for you, but they're not also not in it. I also love the
Right.
asking why. Even if you just ask yourself once, why this? And can come up
Mm-hmm.
with an answer. Something I advocate for that I have read about, I've seen it, I've used it, is co-opting the 5 whys that come from the root cause analysis method,
Mm-hmm.
where you ask why. Well, once you answer that, you ask why again. And those 5 whys drill you down into, well, this is really why I want this or I don't want that. It can help with goal setting. It can help with problem solving. Obviously, it's a way to, after an adverse event, to drill down and figure out why did this happen. But it can also be used for vision casting as
Mm-hmm.
well. So that's something I will try to. I feel like I've seen a video where somebody talked through using it as a coaching tool, and I will try to find that and include a link.
Yeah. Yeah. Another aspect that I think people don't fully appreciate is the notion of timing.
Thank
And
you.
in a professional journey, timing is a massive part of it. And it's hard because you don't control timing.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities that come along at the right time and the wrong time. And it's all got to line up. And some of the best decisions I've made were the trains that I didn't get on.
Yes.
And some of the best decisions I made were waiting for the right train, even when
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to leave the station, but knowing I got to stay put, play the long game. And I have peers that I got to get out of here. And
Yeah.
they hopped on the first train and it ended up being the wrong train
Yeah.
versus waiting for the right opportunity, the right moment, the right boss, the right team. And the folks that figure that out, what my observation is, have longer or rather more sustained success than the folks who just get on whatever the next train is once they decide they're leaving.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit of benefit of hindsight there. And the other side of it is, am I thinking about today or am I thinking about tomorrow, next week, next year, 10 years from now? I'm not a huge fan of the whole what's your 5-year plan
Right.
discussion for a whole bucket of reasons. But owning your career means that you are thinking much further down the road than what's right in front of me.
Yeah. And bi-directionally, one thing I would say for listeners to think about and take away, whether you're the employee or the boss, is as the employee, you should figure out a way to have the conversation with, your supervisor around, here's what I want to do, kind of big picture. And yes, I'm here to do my job now, but here are kind of hopes and dreams and aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
But what is more important is the supervisor to create that safe space for that conversation to take place, and not just have a safe space, but actually open the door. So with my direct reports, something that I feel it's my responsibility to understand is, where is it that you're trying to get to? And how do I understand that to a level where I can help you get there? Be it through experiences, be it through introductions, be it through recommendations. And I know that I'm doing my job well when my top talent ends up leaving me because I've
Yes.
I've
Hooray.
helped them. I understand where they want to go, and I'm an active participant in helping them get there.
Yeah.
And it sucks to lose your best people, but along the way, what I've learned happens is other people line up to work for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's
Because
something
they,
to celebrate. Yeah, there are parts of it that can be sucky, but overall it means, hey, we're doing this the way it's intended.
Mhm.
People are learning, growing,
Right.
and new opportunities are present.
Right.
And being willing to talk with an employee and be the first one to say, if you want to do X, this is what I can offer you in this job, because not every job can be all the stuff, right? If it ends up that you need to leave to accomplish your goal, I will support you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see people be like, oh, I'm valued. They're not trying to get rid of me. They're not mad at me because I want to go someplace else. Love hearing an executive leader say it's a success when people go. We've been talking about choice. We've been talking about leadership. I think it's really important that we acknowledge in this conversation that the idea of career ownership, it relies, at least in part, on privilege. I'm not shy about saying that I am a middle-class white woman in the U.S. I have buckets of privilege. And decision-making, choice-making for me, well, it always hasn't been the type of choice I want. It has always been present for me. And I've been able to see that I have choices. Not everybody gets that. And I really believe that whether it's economic, racial, gendered, or some other form, that there are very real barriers for some people when we talk about career progress. And I certainly don't want to talk about giving advice. Instead, I would like to talk about what can thoughtful advocacy look like. That as a leader, recognize your privilege, look for where there's disparity, and then advocate with compassion and intention. What do you think the right approaches are in that space?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to have a relationship enough to know where people are, because where people are is your
Definitely.
starting point for their development, and their development leads to opportunities. And oftentimes the backgrounds or access you know sets where they are. And so you take the individual and you say, okay, if you have a deficiency in this level or in this area or experience, we're going to build onto your weak spots, so that at minimum you are at peril, like you're competing in the game. Like if I see, you came from a background where you don't have X, Y, and Z tools in your toolbox, and I let that persist year after year, your disadvantage follows you. However,
Mm-hmm.
if we identify and acknowledge and we start filling that toolbox with the gaps that you had because you came from, a public school and you're competing with people who went to Ivy League schools,
Yeah.
okay, so let's first fill your toolbox so you can compete. You then also teach, because one of the biggest forms of privileges is just knowing what to do
Yeah.
in situations, knowing that opportunities exist, knowing what questions to ask, right? And so there's an educational component to it to set a more even floor. And then you have to be transparent enough to say, okay, I've given you the tools. Now you have to compete on a more level playing field.
Yeah.
And here's the criteria for everybody to see, you know, how decisions will be made. And then you also have to hold the line and make sure that access is not a privilege in itself. So you have to make sure that there is an equal access to the people and the settings and the opportunities and the projects and the mentorship,
Mm-hmm.
and avoiding the favorites. And what
Yeah.
happens is, high performing people get more exposure, which means they get more opportunities, which means and it becomes a loop.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have really talented people that just haven't had a chance to perform and demonstrate it, that never get into that cycle. And so recognizing, I don't know if bias is the right word, but just recognizing when you're in one of those loops as the leader and saying, hey, the same four people have had a ton of reps. Let's make sure that we get reps to other people. I know what you can do, but we need to make sure other people have the opportunity to demonstrate what they can do as well. And it's very purposeful and it's very deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's making sure that the people that, there's also a level of transparency with the people that are used to getting all the reps,
Mm-hmm.
and so they know what you're doing as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes with that comes an entitlement to but I'm the A+ performer and I want that opportunity for my next gold star. Well, you've demonstrated you can do this. So let's find you something new, and let's give this opportunity to somebody who's never had a chance to demonstrate what they can do.
You said before, I don't know if this is the right word. I do think bias is the right word. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's prejudice, but it's, oh, these are the people that I have at the top of my list.
Mm-hmm.
And for good reason, not necessarily because, hey, Jimmy's my buddy, but because Jimmy gets work done. I also think it's important for us to talk about kind of the care and keeping of employees, that you have to care for the baseline things. Is pay equitable? Do they have the tools and resources? And then to your point, do I know where they're at? Do I know enough that I know why, that there are reasons why I'm seeing above and beyond from Jimmy and not Bob, but Bob's getting the work done. So why wouldn't
Right.
Bob get And I don't think we can talk about this type of career mentoring without connecting it back to performance management. Have you taken care of the bare minimum as a leader or employer? Are people paid? Do they have the resources, knowledge, and support to get the work done? And then are they meeting expectation? And if they're not, do you understand what's preventing them? Other
Right.
than just assuming that they're horrible people trying to make your life difficult. Do you address those things, and then do you do the work, as you said, to understand how can I fill gaps with you, co-own your development, ideally, so that you can then take ownership, employee?
Yeah, I think the skills that are needed based on the role are the driver.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's work on this within the context of your job, and let's develop this skill set. So I think at all levels of the rung, there are very specific skills and experiences that are essential to be successful, that the leader can hone in on and help develop, so that the person can either stay where they are but be more sufficient and happy, or if they want to continue to advance, they're now ready to do that. But again, you as the leader have to identify what those things are that they need and what
Mm-hmm.
those skill gaps are, and have that bi-directional conversation, and the employee has to opt in as well.
Thank you for bringing up bi-directional conversation. We've talked about, well, you have to identify, you have to understand. The way you do that is through conversation with the employee. Speaking of conversations, I have a question that I want to ask. It's the same question, but I want to ask it kind of two ways. It's about how to start the conversation. So that's the question. How do I start the conversation? The one way is I'm an employee that wants to have a conversation with my manager about my hopes, my aspirations, my preferences. What's your take on the best way to start that conversation?
Yeah, as the employee, I think you put it within the larger time frame. I'm doing this work now. If you actually do enjoy it, I think say like, hey, I like what I'm doing. If you don't like it, I think it's fair to say diplomatically, I don't see myself doing this permanently, but I would like to work with you on better developing myself so that I can advance, or I have options, or I could be in a position to explore, you know, other roles and paths within my professional career. And for me personally, the thing I value is options. It's choice. It's I talk about it in terms of lanes. The more potential lanes I can have for career opportunities,
Yeah.
the better off I will be, because sometimes lanes, doors, whatever metaphor you want to use, they close. Sometimes permanently, sometimes temporarily, and just giving yourself options and freedom, as well. That's how I would approach it if I was an employee. Doing it in a non-threatening but also authentic and honest way. You don't have to lie and say, "Oh my God, I love this job," but if that's not true. Um, Back to the career versus work thing.
Mm-hmm.
you know Everyone understands that sometimes it's a job, and I'm a professional. I'm going to do good at it. I'm going to do it well and to the best of my abilities, but it's not necessarily what I want to do permanently. So how do we work together so that I can find the next thing that I want to do that might lead me to the thing that I want to do permanently?
Now, how do I start the conversation if I'm a manager?
Yeah. So the approach I take is, and I alluded to this earlier, creating a safe space and open the door. So I typically frame it in terms of, well, first off, if I see that the person has high potential, I will draw them out and say, hey, you're doing an amazing job. And I see a lot of different avenues where you could continue to grow, develop, and add value. I'd love to know what areas are of interest to you so that I can better fine tune potential opportunities that I would like to bring to you in the future. If I see someone who maybe has skills that they need developed, you have the conversation in terms of if we round this out, if we add this to the mix, if you were to consider, you know, exploring this opportunity, here's what it could mean in terms of opportunity, advancement, money, whatever. And just, again, open door. And if you're interested in that, I would be interested in having those conversations with you. Because, again, the most important step is that person has to opt in. But you want to convey to them that you see them, you notice them, you've observed, you know, aspects of them, and you're available to have a conversation that may involve helping them grow, get to something different, or progress. What I've found is people just want to be noticed at a detailed level. Understanding the person opens up the conversation. I truly believe, as a philosophy, it's my job. We all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. Part of my job as your leader is to put you in a position to maximize your strengths, to minimize your weaknesses, and to help you develop your weaknesses to whatever that ceiling might be. If you're good at A and you're not good at B, well, then let's find you a role where you get to do A and you only have to do as little of B as you possibly can to be in the role. And you know, when I think about sports, football analogy, you have a quarterback. They design plays around what are the throws that quarterback's good at, and they avoid plays that force them to throw in ways that they're not. It's just like that in the professional workplace. Once you understand the full scale of your folks' talents and weaknesses, but you've got to know that about them.
And that comes through talking to them, observing them, looking at their work product,
feedback, coaching, all of that stuff.
Yeah. One of the things I believe it's important for us to footnote here is that the way we're talking about this is predicated on the employee and the leader having a relatively good relationship, if not a great one.
Yeah.
That being said, I think these discussions can still happen either direction. If you don't have a great relationship with your manager, there are still ways to introduce the topic. And for a manager, if you're dealing with somebody who's not one of your great performers, there are still ways for you to talk about long-term goals, career aspirations. For the employee, one technique that you might consider, and again, this is assuming that you've just somebody that it's not a great relationship. It doesn't mean they're toxic or abusive or harassing you. I'm not advocating for employees to sit down and have a career discussion with an abusive boss. But if it's just, meh, not great, maybe there's low trust for whatever reason, one approach I think is to focus on how did that person get to their job. Ask them about themselves and their own history and progress. And it can tell you a lot about if that's a role that you want, how to navigate toward it. It can also, and this is maybe a little bit sneaky, it can also give you some hints about what not to do if that's not somebody that you admire much. If you have a great relationship, I'm on the same point with you. Open, honest, authentic, cards on the table. Whether it's short-term, long-term, however you position it, just I want to talk about where my career is going. It doesn't mean that I'm saying I want to leave now. It does mean that I'm thinking about these things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that question or statement that you just provided can be so hard to have and initiate, but is absolutely essential, because without declaring what it is that you want, you're leaving it for the other person to assume on their own or to read the tea leaves on their own. Yeah. And so that's another thing that I strongly advise those that I am talking to on this topic is, first step is you have to say what it is that you want. If you want a conversation, if you want opportunities for advancement, if you want coaching, if you want promotion, if you want to move laterally, like, don't make the person guess.
Yeah. Well, this goes back a little bit to that. Sometimes people don't know. So as a leader, are you talking to your team about, hey, this is what it can look like to grow your career. It doesn't mean that you go find the next 7 jobs that you're going to hold. It could mean that you're interested in getting a new certification or pursuing a degree, or that you want to work with a mentor or go shadow somebody in a different job. That's
Right.
one of the ways that you can kind of share your knowledge, the privilege of the experience that you have, and mentor people, is helping them understand that these are the sorts of things that you could ask for
Absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely. And as the leader, it's not getting so preoccupied with the day to day, the next, monthly or quarterly results, the next project, the next fire you're fighting, to slow down and do that deep dive with your people. But again, you have to be very purposeful and mindful to do that, because yeah, you can get caught up as a leader in just trying to meet the next objective, and next thing you're completely disconnected from your people and what it is that they need and want and are aspiring to.
Yeah. Well, this is where I am going to put a big stake in the ground. These conversations, leader to employee, about interests, aspiration, even if it's hey, I don't know, well, let's just talk about what you like or don't like and what you're doing now. This is not something you do once a year. It's not something you do every few years. You do it all the time.
Right.
And it doesn't even have to be formal.
Agreed.
It can be a casual hallway conversation that you're focusing on that person's work. And that doesn't mean that it's just, hey, Kate, the widget you made is faulty. It's, let's talk about your work, this part of your life, and what do you want it to look like. And if somebody's not performing well, you can still talk about their career, but you tie it to, hey, these are the outcomes you're getting. And if you have an interest in doing the next great thing, if you can't improve this outcome, the natural consequence is the next great thing will not happen for you.
Right.
So how do we get you to a place where you can do that?
Yeah. Here's how the higher performance helps you get to where you want to go.
Exactly. You don't wait for that. It's not a carrot or stick. It's just making those connections for people. Before we wrap up, there is another topic that I think is pretty important for us to talk about. And you hinted at it pretty early on in the conversation, Frank. What about failure and disappointment? Sometimes we miss the mark. We don't get the job we want. How do we sustain ourselves during those rough patches in our careers?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd start by saying everybody has to understand that will happen to you.
Yeah.
And probably more than once. And it is not a badge of failure. It is a part of the journey, and arguably the most important aspect of your career will be how you handle the failures, the disappointments, and the rough patches. So in some ways, that is the game. The successful times are the practice, but the game, the pivot points are those failures. All those failures are learning experiences meant to teach you something that will enable future successes. So the key there is be present, feel it. It's okay that it hurts. The value in it is understanding what are the things that you learn and can take away and do differently next time. And then use that disappointment or rough patch to fuel you, to redirect you to something that might be better. What you don't want to do is not learn. What you don't want to do is say, I'm not accountable for any of this. Just because I say I'm accountable for some of it doesn't mean I'm accountable for all of it. But you see people deflect to the point where it's like you miss the punchline, that you miss the thing that you were supposed to learn because you don't want to acknowledge the part that you play in it.
Yeah.
And then eventually you just got to pick yourself up, and you just got to you just got to go forward and try again. It's a whole lot of, in a word, introspection. Another word is growth. And give yourself grace, because every successful person has failed probably many, many, many times. You just don't see it.
I think my word to the wise, if you will, around professional disappointment is kind of the fraternal twin to what you were talking about, is be intellectually honest with yourself about what you owned and what was outside of your control, and do not succumb to the shame that comes with it. You will feel shame. I wish I could make it go away for everyone, but don't hang on to it. And I think be open and vulnerable about the fact that you've had this disappointment. I know for myself, when I was downsized, the shame was really real. And talking to other people, particularly people who had been through that similar type of job loss, normalized it. And I think that's one of the things, is you're going to have success, and you're also going to have some big bumps and bruises if you decide to really take your career in your hands and go forward. And it's so important to understand that if it doesn't work out as you intended, you may own part of it, but you don't have to beat yourself up for it.
Yeah, agreed. Completely agreed. Get back on the horse, as they say,
exactly.
and try again.
So, Mr. Sawyer, last thoughts. What's one big idea that you'd want people to hear here at the end of our time?
Like life, your career is a journey, and it all fits together in the end, but you don't necessarily understand what the bigger picture is when you're taking each step. The important part is you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, one day at a time, and try the best you can on that given day, and seek enjoyment just in the journey, because there is no perfect path. There is no set path. All of our journeys is unique. But you're probably exactly where you're supposed to be at that moment in time. So, as they say, be where your feet are, and just live in the moment and be present.
Frank, I think the only thing I could add to that is don't be afraid to have fun.
Yeah, we need more of that.
Yeah. Well, that's a conversation for another day, but yeah. All right, I know that you have just a few minutes before your next meeting, so I want to be respectful and release you to that and to the rest of your Friday. But I am so glad that you were able to spend some time today. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, it was fun having the conversation. It was fun catching up, and I look forward to future conversations. Thank you, Kate.
Definitely. All right, I'll be in touch soon. Bye, sir. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a rating or review, or share it with others. You'll find Comfy Chairs updates and other thoughts on leadership and learning on Instagram at 123 Limited. That's ONE23 LTD.